If you have a Bible and you want to follow along, please turn in it to Luke chapter 8. This is where we'll be spending our time today. And by the way, you know that hymn, Perfect Submission? Boy, have I got a long way to go before I come to perfect submission. I mean, there's so much of me and so much of what I do until that perfect submission's a distant thought for me. I can't speak for anybody else. This particular episode in the life of Jesus we're going to look at today is one of the weirdest things to me that he ever did. It teaches us things, I'm not saying that, but it is a weird episode. It's a really strange event to look at because it's so outside anything that we experience in any way. So I do want us to look at it today, though, to try to tease out of it just what it could show us today. So let's begin reading. We'll begin reading in verse 26 of chapter 8. Jesus and his disciples sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. And when Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had worn no clothes, had not lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. And when the man saw Jesus, he cried out in a loud voice, fell down at his feet, and said, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of the man. Many times this spirit had seized the man, and though he was chained hand and foot, and under a guard, he would break the chains and escape. He had been driven by the demon into the solitary places in the wilderness. And Jesus asked the man, "What is your name?" Which, by the way, he's not asking the man there. He's asking the demon. "Legion," the demons replied, because many demons had gone into this man. The demons begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on a hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and Jesus gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs. The pigs then rushed headlong down a steep bank into the lake and drowned themselves. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this to the town and in the countryside. And the people went out to see. When they came to Jesus, they found the man in whom the demons had lived, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen this episode told how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. So Jesus got into the boat and sailed back to Galilee. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged Jesus that he might go with Jesus. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home, tell the things that God has done for you." And so the man went back to the town and told all over the town what Jesus had done for him. Now this is one of the weirdest episodes that I can think of that Jesus is involved in. And it raises a lot of questions for we who sit here in the modern era, doesn't it? I mean, I've never had an experience like this. I don't know about any of you. Maybe you have. Maybe for you this is commonplace. It isn't for me. And the people today, when they look at this episode, they fall into two camps. One is they think that this guy was just crazy, right? You remember the little boy? We haven't come to that yet in Luke, but there's an episode where Jesus and his disciples, they go up onto a mountain and Jesus is transfigured before them. And they come down the mountain and the first thing they find is a little boy who is, the text says, thrown down by a demon. And he foams at the mouth. And people read that today and they say this is commonly epilepsy. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. This man, people would say, from our modern perspective, is just a crazy person. Right? We have people that do things like this. We usually put them in some kind of institution. But that's one camp. There's another camp that says, no, these are really non-corporeal entities that have moved into this man's body and are living in there and are controlling him. Now, I look at this as a modern, and I take the text seriously. Jesus took this seriously. He didn't look at this and say, oh, well, let's get him a doctor. He didn't say that at all. He said, who are you? He spoke to the things that were living in this man. He doesn't speak to the man. The man runs up to Jesus and cries out. There are so many things here that are inexplicable, except that this really is a group of non-corporeal, that is, non-bodily entities that are evil that have entered this man and are living in him. I mean, the fact that he breaks all the bonds, he's superhuman in his strength. Where does that come from? He's just a really mean guy? Or is there something else going on? Now, the name given, when Jesus asks, what is your name? He says, Legion, for we are many, the text says. Literally in the Greek it says, we are many. What's a legion? Well, it's a military term. In a Roman legion, there were about 4,500 to 6,000 troops in a legion. So this guy's got a lot of stuff living in him. That's a big number. I mean, for any of us in this room, if there are just two of us living in here, there's a problem. This guy's got thousands of somethings living in him. Mark tells us that there were 2,000 pigs roughly on the hillside. So we learn some things about this. I look at this text, one of the aspects of it that's so weird to me is 2,000 pigs. These pig herders are just minding their business. The pigs are minding their business. This is a big economic loss for these guys, right? This is their whole livelihood. I'm guessing, you've got a herd of pigs and you're tending them. These guys took a real hit here because they were just nearby when this episode takes place. What about the pigs? You may not be like this, but I am. In my house, if Becky says, "Whoo, a spider," and I go in the bathroom or the bedroom and I find the spider, I don't go in there and spray it with something or stomp it or hit it with a shoe. I go get a sheet of notebook paper and scrape him onto the notebook paper and take him outside and shake him off in the bushes so that he could live. Now, if some of you think, Rip, you know what? Something's wrong with you. No, it's a living thing to me. It's a living thing. That thing's alive. I don't know what it's thinking. If it's thinking anything at all, it doesn't matter to me. It's a living thing. And so unless I'm going to eat it, I'm going to let it go if I can. Obviously, if it's a 4-foot rattlesnake, I might have other intentions. I don't think I'm going to grab that and take it outside carefully. But even so, I might. I have done that on the highway. I want you to know that. There have been dangerous animals I've come upon in the middle of the highway, and I have shooed them off into the weeds so that they wouldn't die with the next car that came by. My wife's looking at me like, what? But yeah, I do that a lot because I don't like to see these animals killed for no reason whatsoever. These pigs lost their life today just because they were there. Now, this is a cultural problem. It's a problem in any culture, but it's certainly a cultural problem here because herding animals at this time in history, this may have been their entire livelihood wrapped up in this herd of pigs. And for no reason at all, they got involved in something and they lost the herd of pigs. They got involved in Jesus' ministry moment with this one demonized, the other texts say there were two guys, we're not sure, but the demonized man. These pigs don't care about him. The guys that are herding the pigs, they probably know about him, but they don't expect to lose their livelihood just to get this man out of his predicament, do they? What did we learn from that? There's got to be something in there, and it does teach something. It tells me that God owns everything. I don't own anything. Now we think about that. We think about our property, right? We think about my phone, my laptop, my car, my clothes, my house, my dogs, my whatever. And we grip that property pretty tightly. Let me just ask all of you in this room, when you take that last breath, how much of that property is going with you? How much of it's going with me? Not one speck of it. So that tells me something about how this loss for these pig herders and the pigs, God owns the pig herders, He owns the pigs, He owns the land they're eating from and all the plants they're eating. He owns us too. whether we acknowledge it or not. So the loss is a loss, but this life is not all there is. We learn something too about the demons in the pigs. There are people today, I grew up in the household of one of them, who think that if you dabble in the occult, my mother bought for my sister and I, I was 9 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. I came up for Christmas one morning and I looked under the tree and there was this box. It was purple, dark purple with a light purple drawing on it of this guy in a hood, and it said across the top, Ouija board. And my mother gave us that thing for Christmas. Why? Because for her it was just a game you play. Parker Brothers makes the Ouija board. I mean, come on. They make Monopoly too. And she gave us that thing. And my sister and I got very good at that thing. Very good at it. To the point that we were playing with it one time at my aunt's house, who was a believer, and she made us get rid of it. That's how serious it got at her house. People think that they can dabble with this stuff and that it's okay. But if I'm looking at this text correctly, there's a door that can be opened that you and I don't want to open. And if we do open it intentionally, we are inviting things to come into your life and mine that we don't want there. Now, you may hear this and say, Rip, come on. Think that if you will. I've seen it firsthand. I can tell you it's very real. And the kick in the pants is, with the occult, you may get something from it. Right? You may. I mean, Satan, we think about Satan and we think ugly, sulfurous, big horns, cloven hoofs, really scary. No. The Bible says he comes as an angel of light. He's going to come in and look really attractive and offer you and me things that are going to be very attractive to us. Maybe I want to be successful in my business. Maybe I want to be a rock star. Maybe I want to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Maybe I want to be, whatever it is, make that deal. And you may get what you want, but I promise you, the patron will become the servant. The person that gets the help from this side of the supernatural may get the help, but the patron will become the servant. Always. Always. Now, Jesus comes to this moment, and the demons identify him. Isn't that fascinating? You know, we think, we read our New Testament, well, it's neat and everything, and I've learned a little bit about Jesus, but maybe Jesus wasn't really real, or maybe Jesus didn't live. These things knew who he was, and they say it out loud. They say his name out loud for a reason. It's a Semitic reason that you and I don't have any identification with. In the Semitic world, people thought that if you could say someone's name, you had power over them. So they say his name. Why did Jesus step back from this always? If you look through the texts and you see every place where Jesus has an encounter with the demonic, he always steps back from it. Why? He doesn't want them identifying him. And he doesn't want Satan's endorsement on his ministry either. Now, this man is clearly a Gentile. You know how I know that? Because of where he lives. He lives in what's known as the Decapolis, which is Deca, 10, Polis, cities. There's a group of 10 cities on the eastern side of the Lake Galilee. They're almost all Gentile cities, and the people living in them are Gentiles. You know, there's another clue to this as to these are Gentiles. You know what that is? They're herding pigs. Jews aren't going to be herding pigs. They're just not. For them, that's an unclean animal. I learned something about this man that tells me for sure he's a Gentile. You know what that is? He identifies Jesus in a very specific way. If this man were Jewish, he would say, "O Son of the Holy One." He doesn't say that. He says, "Son of the Most High God." What does that imply? I believe in a bunch of gods. This is just the highest one. This guy's a pagan. He's in a Gentile pagan environment. And Jesus has this encounter. Jesus sets him free. The pigs run down the hill. The demons are gone. The man's set into his right mind. And after all of this, rightly so, I mean, I would feel this way, wouldn't you? Jesus, let me come with you. I want to be part of your gang here. Look at what's happened to me. What a testimony I would have if you took me to the places where you're going to go. And I could tell people about what you did for me. And Jesus says, no. No, I want you to go back to where you came from, and I want you to tell them. Now, why is that? That's another thing that this text teaches us. First of all, if he'd left with Jesus and say he goes back to Galilee, who would know? Who would know anything? He'd just be another one of the gang, right? He's another guy, and maybe he's got a testimony, but you'd have to ask him about that. Nobody would know who this man is. But if he goes back to his hometown, oh, now everybody knows who he is. When the first band I traveled for 18 years with 2 different bands. The first one I traveled with, they had an ethic in their band that they were really serious about, and it was this. If you get born again, you better leave whatever you're doing and become part of some kind of ministry. Don't stay in your job. You got to leave your job and become something else. It took me a long time to struggle through that as a believer because it bothered me. But one thing helped me a lot. We only got $50 a week when we were traveling, and I could not pay my car insurance on $50 a week, so I knew I was going to have to do something to supplant that, subsidize my income just a bit so that I could pay my car insurance. So I did some jobs for people in the Ocean Grove region of New Jersey as I was living there. But there's another thing. I learned as I traveled. I met studio musicians who were studio musicians of a very high caliber. They played on people's records that you would know. They were Christians, but they stayed where they were. In the studio, in the pagan world of secular music. And the people I traveled with criticized them pretty heartily. But I learned, there's something to that. Sometimes God calls people to stay where they are. This man, when I first became a Christian, I was traveling. I had a home base in Maryland, in Annapolis, Maryland. Family took me in, said, you can stay with us. Give us $20 a week, food and stuff like that. So I said, that's great. So I stayed there. And then when we went on the road, I would drive to New Jersey, get in the vehicle, and we would go. Well, when I became born again, I thought, I'd like to be baptized. And I could have gone to that little church in Maryland where I was born again, and they would have been happy to see me baptized there, but I didn't. I came back to Waycross. And I had a reason for it. The reason I came back to Waycross was there were a lot of people who grew up with me. They knew who I was, and now they're going to learn who I am. There's a difference between who I am and who I was, and they're the only ones who would know. Right? So I wanted to come back here and say, here's who I am now, and this is why. Just like the demoniac. Go back to your hometown. You tell the people there. They know that you've been running around naked out here in the tombs for all these years and running around crazy, and now you're set in your right mind. We want them to know what Jesus has done for you. That's where it really matters, right? So notice something too. We learned that. Maybe God wants us where we are. Then we learn something about what it is to confront the demonic. Notice Jesus here. You don't see anything in the text that talks about Jesus with a sweaty brow and bulging eyes and shaking and shouting. You don't see any of that. What do you see? You see the Son of Man speaking to these things as calmly as I'm speaking right now. Why is that? He's the boss. You and I, the Spirit of God lives in you and I. Guess who's the boss? Not them. He's still the boss, and He lives in us. That makes us kind of the second in command, if you want to look at it that way. When we encounter something of the demonic, we've nothing to fear. Jesus lives in us. So what about where we live right now? Is there a danger to us in the modern era from these things, these sorts of things? Yes, there is. And it comes in ways that you and I might not think so dangerous, which is always Satan's way. to try to fool us into thinking these things are innocent. Parker Brothers makes the Ouija board. Parker Brothers makes Clue. Parker Brothers makes Monopoly. What could be wrong with that? But there are even more innocent things that it comes through. Ed and I were visiting a 3 weeks ago and happened to get into conversation. Ed was talking, there were 3 or 4 guys standing there. Ed's talking to these guys, and I'm talking to this one guy. And he's talking to me about his work. And I just asked him about it. What do you do? Where do you work? What's it like? And I said, boy, it sounds kind of dangerous. He said, yeah. He said, I almost got hurt last week. But, knock on wood, I wasn't hurt. And, you know, we think like that, don't we? Or somebody carries a rabbit's foot or a St. Christopher pendant around their neck and they think, this is important to me because it keeps me safe or it brings me good fortune or whatever. We think, or I like to read my horoscope just because it's in the paper. Why not? Anything can become a fetish. And a fetish opens the unopened door. I don't care what anybody thinks about that. I'm just telling you how it is. Why? Because I've heard these things speak. I've heard it. And the ways that these people became demonically involved were through things just like that. And what will happen is, look at it. Think about it this way. I'm at work. I walk under my ladders all the time. I can't help it. They're there. They're propped up. I got to go from here to there, and the ladder's between me and it, so I go under the ladder. Black cats run in front of our cars and stuff all the time, don't they? Because some cats are black. I mean, but if we grant these things power, what are we saying? We're opening the unopened door. We're cracking it open and saying, you know what? That's real. There's real power there. As a believer, you and I have an obligation to fight through this. I'm just going to say it for what it is. We are obligated to fight through it. Because it is not reality. What is reality is there's only one person on the throne of the universe. Only one. And it boils down to that, doesn't it? Who is Lord? The rabbit's foot? Or the knocking on the wood? Or the don't walk under the ladder? Or is Jesus Lord? Now, this may seem terribly legalistic to some people, but think about it the other way around. How legalistic is it to have to always grab the rabbit's foot before we go out the door? Or make sure that we don't leave the house without our lucky coin or the St. Christopher around the neck? Whatever it is, that we should look at those things as though they have real power. What are we saying? They're sitting on the throne with God. He's sharing His throne with those things in my life. That's what we're saying. Demons have a conscious knowledge of who God is and who His Son is. How do I know that? It says it right there. Not only do they know who the Most High God is, which is a pagan way to say that, but they also know who His Son is. Jesus, you, the Son of the Most High. Think of this for a moment. I had a relative of mine. Right when I got born again, I got into a conversation with this relative and I was asking them, you know, when you're first born again, you're really obnoxious most of the time. You're really a pain in everybody's watusi. I mean, you ask them questions that you shouldn't ask at the dinner table. You say things you shouldn't say while they're watching the football game, but can't help it. You're born again and you're just so filled up with the Lord, you got to do it. So I got into a conversation with somebody and they finally got tired of me and they said, look, Rip, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And at that time in my life, I just accepted that. I'm looking at this text here and saying, look, who else believes that? Do you think these demons are born again? Right? They know who He is, don't they? They know all about Him. The difference is they don't know Him. That's the difference. They can cozy up to Him. They can know facts. People think that. Oh, I know the facts about God. I know the facts about Jesus. I know Jesus lived in the first century and He had disciples and He taught things and He hung on a cross. He was crucified by Pilate. We can take the creed and read it off. Some of us can recite the Nicene Creed. But does that mean that we're born again just because we can say it? No. These demons knew all that. I assure you, they don't. When Jesus said, "I go to prepare a place for you and me," He didn't say that to them. And yet they know all those things. They know them better than a lot of us do. You see, this is why God doesn't accept that kind of belief where I just know things. He does not. He wants to know what you and I have done. Have we been to the cross? Have we come and asked Jesus to save us, to forgive us? If we've not, then all the knowledge in the world isn't going to mean anything when we stand before Him. And then look at these townspeople. We say, oh, you know what? If God would just heal my plantar fasciitis, if He would just take away this flu or this cold, or if He would make me successful in this or that, He'd do this miracle for me, I would follow Him. No, we wouldn't. Look at these townspeople. They've seen the guy. They know this guy's down there, right? Living naked in the tombs. They know something's really, really wrong with this guy. And then in an instant, he's healed. And they come, and what do they want? They want Jesus to leave. We're the same way. The miracles that we might ask for are not going to grant us salvation or faith. What's going to grant us that is we ask for it. We come to God and ask for it. So what do we learn here? What things do we learn? One thing we learn is God plants us where we are. He plants us where we are for a reason. And He wants us to serve with all our might to be the best believer we can be right where we are. May not mean we go off somewhere in some ministry opportunity. May mean we work at the shoe store, or that we dig ditches, or that we build houses, or that we work at Walmart, or that we work at B-Way, or we do something like that our whole life. But God has us where we are for a reason. To disciple other people where we are and where we can. He may not ask us to go anywhere. He might ask us to be a homemaker our whole life. Secondly, and I take it from the text, I mean, this man was sent back to his town. He didn't go off to be a missionary with Jesus. He went back to his town. Secondly, we can't let anything or anybody or any fetish sit in the throne with God. Period. If we do, we're opening the door to things that are going to take us away from Him. They're going to convince us that something has power. Does it? No. You know what a Ouija board is? It's a chunk of masonite, about this big. You get a little plastic thing with felt feet on it and a little window with a nail stuck through it. And it's got letters and numbers all over. That's a Ouija board. What is that? Nothing. It's nothing. What is a St. Christopher pendant? Maybe it's made out of half and half. What is a cross? What is a rabbit's foot? Nothing. But if we open the unopened door and grant it to be something that we think it really is not, we open that door and things start to happen. And we might think to ourselves, you know, really that rabbit's foot kind of saved me today. I wrecked my car, but I'm all right. I had my rabbit's foot. We're cracking the unopened door. And I promise you, any foothold we give will become a foothold in our life. And that means somebody's trying to share the throne with God. I don't know where everybody is today, but if I've said anything about which you've got a question, you want to speak with me after the service, talk about me. You can talk about me in my presence or when you leave. Talk to me about your life with the Lord or about this church. I'll stay as long as it takes as we close.